Hi, it's Rachel. This is just a quick little disclaimer about this episode. So, in this episode, we talk about The Wire, and obviously, things are now as they have been regarding the police, but that is starting to come to light and be brought to a lot more people's attention. And things have gotten worse, and people are working really, really hard to make them better. The Wire is a show that is focused very intensely on police and lots of things that are wrong with them and the way that they treat people who are people in situations that are not enviable. A lot of the things that it said in 2002 are just as and maybe more so relevant than they were at the time. But this episode could be hard to listen to. If it is, go ahead and skip it. Please forgive us for all of the things that we are, and know that we try to be as understanding as possible, and we might have made mistakes, and we'd love to hear it if we did, because we like to grow and be better. On an additional note, I have two dogs, one of whom is very old and one of whom is very not, and they make the first part of this episode a little bit intolerable. So if you already know a lot about The Wire and just want to skip to our reactions, you won't have to hear my dog screaming and jingling back and forth. I will try and get that fixed in future episodes. He was just really excited. So that's our little disclaimer. With all of that said, I hope you can enjoy and stay safe out there and fight for what you believe in. Hi, welcome to Hey Look at My Thing. I'm Rachel, and I'll be our host this week, joined as always by Keegan.
Hi.
And Aaron.
Hello.
So I don't actually have any bullshit, despite being a big fan of bullshit. I'm sure we'll bullshit enough on the way in, but I am super hype and have been super hype because this week it's my pick and we are watching The Wire, sort of a seminal piece of television history. So tell me, my good, gentle friends, what do you already know about The Wire?
Like when you said, like in my head already, like that was the word that I have heard used to describe it a lot, seminal. Like it was like very for its time. And obviously I'm not sure if it holds up because I didn't watch it and I haven't watched it, so I don't know. But when it came out, I remember it. There was a lot of buzz on it. Like it was like, this is the show you have to watch. It's kind of like the same kind of buzz people had about like The Sopranos and Breaking Bad, those kind of shows.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said Breaking Bad. I would put it very much in the same sort, like it scratched the same sort of itch for me that Breaking Bad did. I think that's a good comparison to make.
I know far less than Keegan. Like this title I've certainly heard of, but I don't remember much or anything about it. It kind of rubs me the way of like 24, where it's got like this seemingly high drama kind of show and also very big for its time. And it looks like it's kind of released around that time frame.
Yeah, I think it came out so the premiere was 2002 on HBO. I'm not exactly sure when 24 came out, but it feels like they were pretty close to contemporary.
I mean, I watched 24 and just the feel I get from when people talk about The Wire and what I remember 24. 24 seems definitely more sensationalized, more unrealistic. What this seemed was more grounded and gritty and realistic.
Yeah, so I think that you're right. Like I think that 24, the other thing about 24 is that it always seemed very like action packed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there is a lot happening all the time. And The Wire has a little bit more flow than that, I think. So it's maybe a little bit less like particularly
all the time. There's a lot of action happening, and there's bad men with guns and whatever. It has a little bit less of that than 24. Realistically, like I said, I think that Breaking Bad is a pretty good comparison for a lot of the things that it does. And so if you're familiar with that as a media property at all, that's definitely sort of where you should keep your expectations. There's a couple of things that going in, I think are important to mention. So I've been saying for like 3 weeks while we've talked about this coming up that I think that you guys are going to be sad about this show. And the reason for that is when we first watched Leverage together, we talked about how one of the things that was really nice about it was that it was just kind of the sort of show that was like popcorn, right? You could like watch an episode or 45 and just kind of like have it on in the background, and your brain didn't super have to engage. The Wire at this point, and I mean, granted, it's almost 20 years after it came out and over 10 years since it ended. The show stopped running in 2008, I believe. But it has like critical literature about it. Like people have written books about it from like a literary critic's lens. It has college courses about it, just focused on The Wire. Like that is the main text that they dissect for a semester.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. They do a lot of things that are very interesting and very cool. And it really is like you could sit down with each episode and sort of air quotes read it like you might read a book. There's a lot going on. The creator of the show, David Simon, is pretty well known for being a director who likes to tell that kind of like very intense, pretty realistic, or at least grounded in reality story. The show was endorsed by President Obama. He invited David Simon, the creator, to the White House for a conversation and was like, now, first off, I do love The Wire. And David Simon was like, oh, thank you. So like, if you're a fan of old President Obama, he was a fan of The Wire. And I think, yeah, I think that's the main stuff. Again, it's a little bit more realistic. I've heard, although this may be apocryphal, but I've heard that it was realistic enough that they received cease and desist orders or like threats over some of the things that they were putting in there. So like it is definitely providing commentary, again, much in the way that like Breaking Bad is, right? So they're sort of getting at a similar niche in the market. There's definitely moments of like levity and moments of humor. It's a very human story, despite the fact that it deals with big issues. So it focuses on, each season has a slightly rotating sort of core cast of characters who are important. And it's very much like the opposite of Leverage. There is not a clear like, oh, these people are the protagonists and they're maybe a little shady, but they're good guys. And like, these people are the bad guys. And like, that stuff isn't clear. So
everything is like shades of gray.
Yes, very definitely. And that is extremely intentional. Like just when you start to be like, oh, I really hate this person. They're the fucking worst. They'll be like, oh, but here's a really redeeming thing about them being sad about their dog or whatever. And it just kind of, it does a really nice job of playing with sort of what your expectations are.
In that vein, it sounds like maybe a more grounded and realistic Game of Thrones.
Oh boy. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. I think that there's a lot less, maybe not a lot less. There's a little bit less of like keeping up with 35 different storylines.
Okay.
Which for me was like the big sort of like drawback to Game of Thrones was like, oh, here's one more fucking person I have to keep track of. But it definitely has a little bit of that where like, really nobody's a good guy, really nobody's a bad guy. They're all just people. And sometimes people suck and sometimes people are great. And that's just the way that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything that we should expect going into this or anything you want to clarify before we get started?
I don't think so. There is one other thing, I guess. The show is set in Baltimore. It could very easily be a stand-in for most sort of like major cities in a lot of ways. But they were very intentional. And
hello.
My dog will not stop screaming. There's a dog outside and he's losing his entire shit. The show is set in Baltimore, and they were very intentional. Oh my God, very intentional about using Baltimore as kind of like a character in the show. So they put a lot of thought into how things are shot, and people who are like Baltimore locals said. Well, first of all, they used a lot of them in the show, and they were like on scene when they were filming the show. So they were actually in Baltimore. But people said like, yeah, it's just like you walk down the street and like, oh shit, the wire's there. Like, oh, I guess we're gonna have to cross the other side of the street. Like, fuck, I don't know. But like the things that you see are not set dressings really. In an interview I watched, they said that they would like send people in to like really, really terrible like neighborhoods or abandoned houses and things like that. And they mentioned specifically for a scene that's in sort of like a junkie's house, that they went in and swapped out the used needles for clean needles and otherwise left everything basically the same.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. So again, when it says like, oh, we're trying to be true to this and we're trying to depict it realistically, they really took that very seriously. So at times it can be a little bit kind of upsetting. So, just keep that in mind that this is trying very much to sort of show a digestible version of sort of things that were and honestly still are happening.
I'm curious because I never watched any episodes of The Wire, but I have seen episodes of Breaking Bad and Sopranos, and I liked them but didn't love them. And I'm wondering if I'm going to get a similar sort of like feel in my body from this.
I would expect that very much. Again, like I said, like as soon as you guys were like, oh yeah, I really like this kind of like lighthearted romp, I was like, well, this is not the thing I want you to ingest, is not going to be your favorite, but that's okay.
It's like, I really like chocolate. How about a beet?
Yeah, you know what? I love it enough for 3 people. So if you both hate it, I think it's fine. Are there any other like questions or expectations going in, or do you wanna blaze this thing?
I'm in it. Let's do it.
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, let's make it happen.
Hey, it's your good friend Rachel again. This week's episode is sponsored by Vote.org, and by sponsored, I mean it's a cause that we all 3 really believe in. Vote.org is a website that lets you check and update your voter registration. And you might be thinking that the election is pretty far away, but some states are notorious for purging voter rolls. Your local elections are just as important and often more important than the presidential election. The president matters, but often the people with the most influence on our day-to-day lives are our local politicians. We need only to look at Las Vegas and Minneapolis and the entirety of Missouri to know that our local officials, like governors and sheriffs and mayors and the commissioner of the police board, can make a massive difference in our quality of life. We have to vote for these people. We have to try our best to be informed about who we're voting for. And your voice matters. You can make a difference. The loudest way we have to use our voices is to vote. Please, we are begging you. Vote. And to help you out, go to vote.org and check and make sure that you are still registered to vote, so when you show up on polling day, you are ready to go. So, we're back. We have watched the first episode of The Wire. Does anyone want to do just like a quick summary of kind of what went down in this episode in case someone needs a refresher?
Sure. It took me like quite a long time to like actually understand what was going on. There are a lot of characters, and it's definitely not a show that has like, I mean, it's a realistic story and they're real people. So it's not like the guy with the blue hair and the yellow jacket is, there's not a lot that's memorable about the people that stands out in their appearance necessarily. So like just seeing the different people, like I was like, who works for who? But okay, there is a detective. He is essentially the protagonist of this. He talked to back up, there was a murder, and the person who was involved in it was in court. They had witnesses testify against him, but there was also some tampering with the witnesses and intimidation tactics that made the defendant walk. And this detective who's a protagonist talked to a judge about it after the case and spilled some beans about things, which I don't fully understand why it was a bad thing, to be honest, because that's the type of person I am, and it offends me that people are like, don't do the right thing. But anyway, it led this whole like investigation that he was part of, and people from other departments are getting together to work on it. There are still a lot of side characters who aren't totally fleshed out, but there is this detective lady. Well, is she a detective or a beat cop? I'm not sure. But she seems to be important and is going to be working on it with him. And then there are, of course, a bunch of street gang characters who are part of this, and drug addicts. It's just a very like inner city slums, like just dealing with all of the nonsense that is part of that. And I think that's where we're going to be talking a lot about.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, so a couple of important people. The like detective who spoke up, who was honest with the judge. His name is Jimmy McNulty. One of the characters, specifically Bubs, who is the guy who was like making the fake money with the coffee stains on it. Bubs, once they meet up, consistently calls him McNutty for like 4 seasons, which is good to my heart. But yeah, his name is Jimmy McNulty, and he's a complete asshole. But not, I think you're right, Aaron. He like super wasn't in this case. He just told the truth about a thing he had noticed. However, obviously people in his department disagree.
So one thing I want to say, and I know this is like totally off topic, but I have to share. So I was hearing McNulty, the detective. I was hearing like some English accent kind of slipping through, but very masked. And I was like, this guy is not an American actor. I have to look this up. So I quick wikied, and yes, he's an English actor. And while he does a pretty good American accent, there's just touches of it that slip through of his English accent. I'm like, that's English. That's English. So,
did you notice though?
Yeah,
the guy who plays Stringer Bell, he is also an English accent.
Yeah, it's young Idris Elba, who first of all is beautiful, and second of all is also very English, for sure.
That's very interesting.
They like I heard a story on some interview with him when he got this role. His agent set him up with the casting interview, but the person who was running the casting interview, like the maker of the show, wanted somebody from Baltimore that had a Baltimore accent.
Yeah.
And so he went in there and they didn't know he was English, so he like pretended to have a Baltimore accent, and like they wanted somebody that was actually from Baltimore, so he pretended that he was from Baltimore during the interview, and like after the interview he'd like, "Hey man, I gotta tell you, I'm not actually from Baltimore. I don't want this to be like, you know, like that." And he's like, "You know what, that's okay, you know, you're right for the role, so we're gonna put you in there anyway."
Yeah. He's a fantastic actor, but he's amazing throughout the show. Obviously he's a pretty important character in it. I don't think that's like a spoiler at all. But he does a truly amazing job. They have sort of a habit of taking English actors. Aidan Gillen, I believe is how you say his last name, who was also Peter Baelish on Game of Thrones, is in one of the later seasons. He's like a really big character in the 4th season, and then he sticks around for the 5th season a bit too. But he's Irish natively, and like he does a really great job, and you really can't tell very much. But like, yeah, it's a thing that comes up a lot, is that they end up with like people who have completely the wrong accent, and then they're like really focused in Baltimore.
The casting in this is really good. I recognize almost everybody as like really heavy character actors in tons of other shows. His partner, the heavyset black guy,
Bunk
he's
Moreland.
in a ton of things. The tall, thin black guy, he's in a ton of things. The kind of other protagonist of this episode, the man who got off for murder, he's been in a ton of things, as his brother, uncle. There was some sort of family relation there. The guy who played both the junkies I recognize from multiple things. Um,
Did you
one of
recognize tiny Michael B. Jordan as
Yep,
Wallace?
yep, yep.
Like a
Uh,
14-year-old? He was so
hmm
cute.
The 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 two bro kind of cops. The white
Yes.
one is he's in a ton of stuff, and then the white captain guy,
Yep,
he is
Rawls.
in Breaking Bad. I'm fairly certain.
Oh, is he?
I
I
thought
believe
is
it.
he I thought he was the like brother-in-law of Walter White, the one that plays the
No,
cop.
I
No, is that a different guy?
think that's a different guy. Um,
Are you sure? Are you 100% sure?
no, I'm never 100% sure on any actor. Just like, let's see. William Bill Rawls, portrayed by John Doman. Oh God, it is.
It is him. Yeah, okay. Or is it?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wait, is it?
No, is
No,
it? No, no.
no.
It's a different is it a different
Okay.
guy?
It's
It
not.
looks
It's a
very
different guy.
similar.
He looks so like the older version of him looks similar. So
Yeah.
when it popped up on Wikipedia, I was like, oh shit. But no, it's not the same guy. He has done other things. Specifically, it looks like Fox's Gotham is sort of a big one.
Mm,
But like, yeah, he does a great job. It's fascinating to me because we've been watching through very slowly, and we're in season 5, and like going back and looking at it. The first episode of season 1, there's so many moments where I'm like, but there's a
hmm,
lot of like tension to it, that sort of like dramatic irony, because I of course know what's going to happen to all of these people.
yeah.
So it's interesting. I have like a ton of things that I am happy to talk about, but I'm excited to hear what your guys' reactions are. Is there anything that like stood out particularly? Anything you liked or hated or?
I think first of all, the most standout thing is that the acting is excellent.
Mhm.
Everything is very believable. Like you believe that these are real people. You know, they are not caricatures of people. They are not like, oh, outlines of people. You believe that these are real people, that you could believe that these are definitely based even on real people. Um, Obviously, uh, the the undertone of all basically the government in this is that it's, you know, just it's not good. You know, it's not well done. It's like, you know, people doing a job not for, you know, maybe the highest moral reasons, but just doing a job because that's your job.
Mhm.
Um,
That's
and
very
not.
definitely something that, like, comes up, especially with, like, the police department a lot,
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
they're about solving crimes because it's the job that they get paid to do, or, like, because they feel like they're intellectually superior to criminals, but not necessarily for all of them, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily out of, like, a sense of justice or, like, this is what's right. There's definitely some, like, ulterior motives there, which
Yeah,
is
I mean
fascinating.
the line that they have, like it, you know, it's like you gave a fuck when it wasn't your turn to give a fuck, you know,
Mhm.
like and you know, watching other shows like this, I understand how characters get to that point, because if you give a fuck all the time, like every single time, every single case, every single thing you hear, you just burn yourself out like
Yeah.
super fast. You have to, in some ways, treat it like it's a job. When I'm done with it, I have to put it away. But you know, there's that line you cross, where you lose empathy and you just, you know, don't care anymore. And it seems like there are definitely some characters either over that line already or heading there real quick.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stands out, and it's just how much they are all working the entire way through this.
Hmm.
It's an American cultural phenomena, but it's also just really taxing on people. And I think people normalize this behavior.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's kind of transitions to my next point that I wanted to talk about. This is that this entire show is normalizing a lot of terrible behaviors, or just showing how we normalize terrible behaviors.
Yeah.
Um, it's just all over the place. But them getting drunk and driving, and
Yup.
Hmm.
and just this guy wronged me, so I'm going to beat the crap out of him. Let's beat this guy up. Let's shoot this guy. It's just, this episode is the worst of people, and I think that was intentional.
Yes.
You had mentioned that we get to see the best of people at times. I don't see that at all in this episode. Like, there's very little redeeming qualities except for maybe truthfulness. Everybody is a little bit of shit.
Yeah.
Well, and he
Yeah.
gets punished for that too.
Yeah.
Yes, he does. I think that it's very true that, like, so McNulty is set up as sort of like the main kind of like protagonist on the police side of the story. And it's true, like, he's not a good person. We hear about kind of the, like, at the end he talks a little bit about like the very messy divorce
Divorce,
proceedings
yeah.
with his wife or ex-wife. He is definitely an alcoholic. He definitely drives while he's inebriated. He makes some really, really bad choices. So, like, his department was pissed at him for being honest about these crimes that were happening because they're under a lot of, it comes up later, not much later. They're under a lot of pressure to like fill quotas. So the goal is to not leave any like dead bodies, right?
Yeah,
To
yeah.
not leave any unsolved murders, which is, I mean, reasonable. You don't want to do that, but also the idea of like filling a quota is kind of not a good way to handle justice. So like him speaking up is really fucking over some people from like a numbers department, but also should they really be running on a numbers game anyway? Because these are like people's lives, but also like it's complex. Like many of the things are complex. I would disagree that there's nobody good in this. I think the one exception that we see, and again, I've watched more of the show, is Bubbles, who again is the guy who is like making the fake money and his friend gets the shit beat out of him. Obviously, like, making counterfeit bills isn't good. Making counterfeit bills and passing them off to your drug dealer sort of gets into a moral gray area that's like chaotic neutral.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Bubs, so the sort of like character was really widely lauded, especially at the time, as being somebody who is an addict who's shown with a lot of compassion. At the end, he was talking to Kima, who I think is also, for the most
Oh
part,
yeah, yeah. She was, in my mind, maybe like the most upstanding individual
yeah, she
character on the
has
show.
some problems, but she's also like, she's a little bit my perfect woman. She's like brilliant, and she's competent and confident and beautiful, and like you can't ask for anything more than Kima. But like, I don't know, they work a lot, and so she runs into some trouble too. She's definitely not a perfect character, like none of them are. But Bubbles was widely lauded. He becomes a criminal informant, and the role is an addict that's treated with a lot of compassion and has a lot of kindness, and a lot of people who are like struggling with addiction sort of identified with him and the cycles that he goes through, and like trying to get clean and it not working and then trying again and it not working and just kind of like going back and forth, and how hard it is to stay clean in the kind of like dire economic straits that he is in, and he really is in. Also, the actor was so good that he was once approached by like person who lived in Baltimore who just like handed him some heroin and said he looked like he needed a fix. And
gosh.
also one time on set, he was chased off set because they thought he was like an actual junkie. So like,
oh my god.
Yeah, he called the guy handing him the heroin like a street Oscar or something, which I think is hysterically funny. But he does a truly amazing job in the role. And I know that like throughout it, for the most part, Bubbles is one of the characters who probably sticks closest to actually being a good person the whole way through, which is remarkable and delightful because he's also an addict. And there's never a time when he's not an addict, even when he's like going through recovery. So yeah, it's interesting that they chose him to kind of be one of the exemplars of morality.
I also noticed that it was subtle, but I'm assuming they probably hit on it a couple more times. But this happened very soon after, like a year after 9/11, when we were starting the wars in the Middle East, and you could see like it kind of colors everything they see in the TV, and they talk to the FBI, and it's like, you know, it was a big part of everybody's everyday life.
Yeah.
And they wanted to make sure that was like seen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very definitely.
Yeah, I have to say that if you had watched this in 2002, every bit of that would just be like, oh yeah, like I get it. And you would have that feeling of like, oh, this is like part of our zeitgeist.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
looking back at it, it's still done so subtly and still
Hmm.
it's powerful, but it's not like shoved down your throat. It's enough to like color the time frame, and those of us who experienced it would, have, I wouldn't say nostalgia, but there's definitely that feeling of like we went through
Sense
that.
memory.
Yeah,
Mhm.
we've seen it before, but maybe somebody who's born in like 2000 who really didn't experience that would look at it and say like, oh yeah, that's just coloring that picture. And I just wonder like how that would show up for them if they how they would experience that.
Yeah, I didn't really. I think it comes up kind of a lot because it's sort of a like narrative device as well. Like they're investigating this big case and they can't really get the help that they want from the FBI because the FBI is pulling out of drug cases because, to quote Jimmy McNulty, they don't have love in their heart for two wars, so
Yeah, they don't have enough
they can't
resources for that.
continue
Yeah.
on drugs because they're focused on the war on terrorism. So it sort of colors a lot of the
How
show.
did that go, by the way?
In the war on drugs or the war on terrorism? Because in the war on
Really
drugs,
both.
won. In the war on terrorism, I'm not really sure what we were doing there in the first place, so I'm not equipped to answer that.
Yeah. I'm curious because Aaron has traditionally not recognized actors and people. Did you recognize any actors and people in the show?
Not a single one.
Oh, beautiful.
I did not recognize anybody.
Idris Elba is literally one of the most famous people in the world currently.
So wait, who,
He
Alba?
won he won the sexiest man of the year a couple of years back, which like I get. he's pretty dreamy, gotta say.
What is his name?
Idris, Idris Elba, Elba. What's
Okay.
he been in? He's been in so much.
He was
He's
in
in
the
an
Thor movies.
he's in an amazing BBC show called Luther that's
Oh, it's
also
so
about a
good.
detective
So,
who's a
so
piece of
good.
shit. It's so good. It's amazing.
It
Um,
starts with him killing a child molester.
yeah, it's really hard to watch. Like I watched through a lot of it and I really respect how well done it is, but at a certain point it just like it wears on your soul. It gets so like heavy and
It
difficult to
is.
watch. Um,
It's like bad things happen and then more bad things happen.
and there's just no respite for this poor man. Anyway, that's
Nope.
a totally separate show.
I just feel
Uh,
like that well-read person who never watches TV and then like knows weird things but doesn't know any pop culture.
yeah.
Except I'm not well-read and I just don't know pop culture.
So you can be our Giles. You
Yeah,
like know
exactly.
all of the things, and we have to explain the pop culture to you, and that's fine. Giles is like the best character. There's our Buffy reference for this week.
Yes, we did
Yeah,
it.
yeah, exactly. We gotta mention that.
Yeah. I sort of know him in your defense, Aaron. I sort of know him because I like seek him out, because he is consistently an amazing actor, and I think that he, for the most part, chooses projects pretty carefully. Which is not to say that everything he chooses is like a carefully thought out, very like narratively complex drama. He's definitely been in some things that are like, like
Newest Fast and the Furious movie,
yeah,
he
the
was the
new
bad guy in
Fast
that.
and the Furious movie, right? He was the bad guy, and it's just like fun garbage. But also, like, even when it's fun garbage, he does a nice job, and it's
Oh,
clear that
he's
he like
incredible.
chooses fun garbage because it's fun. And like that's okay for him to just want to do a project where he has fun. And I am okay just watching a thing where he's having fun. And honestly, I'd watch him watch paint dry. So I'm not super choosy. He's my big celebrity crush. Speaking of celebrity crushes, I do want to briefly call out The Wire on being 2002 and having like a really wholesome lesbian relationship in it.
Yeah.
Yes, I definitely wanted to touch on this because that was like it's such a, for the time, like you have to think about 2002, there's
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
not a lot out there that's mainstream, and so you're walking a
No.
tightrope. And the fact that they did it subtly, but with enough like oomph behind it to make it very clear this is not sisters living together. This is not friends.
Yeah.
But they didn't do any more than say like they're living together, they're partners, and that's it. And then they moved on with everything else.
Yep.
I think it helps that it was on HBO. HBO
Yeah.
is definitely the most progressive network about those kind of issues. They had several shows that would show uh, lesbian gay couples like years and years and years before the mainstream had kind of got there.
There is also, I think it comes up in the next episode, maybe. We didn't see him in this episode, which is a shame. I kind of hoped that we would. But there is a character named Omar who comes up very, very soon and is based on a real life person from Baltimore. But Omar is on sort of the drug dealer's side of the story. He's definitely not on their side, but he's sort of more in with that crowd than he is with the police necessarily.
The neighborhood side, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. And he is Black. He is a gay man. He's not into drag, which like a lot of the times when you see Black gay men, you immediately see them in drag. That's not his thing. He just has like a really loving, wholesome relationship with his boyfriend. There's like a gay sex scene between them that again is like not hateful. It's just like loving. They just like have sex. It's nice. So like they do a lot of things that, especially since like he's Black and he's a part of this community that is like very focused on sort of like image and appearances, and the fact that he's gay comes up a lot and is like used against him, and he never actually gives a shit and just has like a really nice boyfriend and they have a lovely relationship. They do such a good job with like treating it like a relationship. Omar's relationship with his boyfriend isn't perfect. Kima's relationship with her girlfriend is not perfect. They don't like sensationalize it. They don't fetishize it. It's just a thing that is a part of these people's lives. And it's so like, it warms my heart so much to know that this was a thing that was on TV in 2002.
Right.
And like in 2002, I was 9. I wasn't going to be watching this show. There's a bunch of titties in the first show. But that said, like,
when did you start watching this?
Oh boy, this last year, I think, within the last 12 months. So we've burned through. We're almost to the end of season 5, which is I think season 5. We're almost to the end of the last season. And it has been quite a ride, but it's like to the point where even though I'm not at the end, I've like started to rewatch some of the earlier episodes because I wait to watch it with Mark, and he's not always home when I want to watch The Wire, so I'll just like go back and watch an earlier one that's good. But yeah, there's a lot to it, so it's easy to get into. But yeah, their relationship and the way that they treat gay relationships in general, I think is really, really well done in this show, and adds something to me, the contemporary viewer in 2020, that maybe some of the other older shows wouldn't have had. I think in this respect, it really aged well.
Yeah, I think everything, the layers that they give to people that aren't clumsy, they're very deliberate, and it just makes them seem like real people. And that's just really well done. And that I had heard that that was the professionalism and the incredible amount of work that they did to make this feel like it does. And you can see it on the screen. And I can see why this has such a high place on people's, top show lists and best show lists and that kind of stuff, because you can tell that it's a very, very good show.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. The writers. So I agree that it's sort of layered in like a very delicate, very subtle way, and they're really good at that, like that old middle school writing rule of like show don't tell, right? Like we see that Wallace, little kid Michael B. Jordan, is educated or bright maybe. As soon as he's saying like Hamilton's not a president, we get immediately like, okay, he's a little bit more either educated or a little bit brighter than like the people that he's having this conversation with. And they didn't have to tell me that. Like, I know because I saw him with this like one-off piece of dialogue. But a lot of the writing team weren't actually screenwriters. They weren't writers really in that way. They were journalists and authors who had worked in the Baltimore area. Like David Simon, the creator of the show, was a reporter for the Baltimore Sun and wrote some books about life and crime in Baltimore, and then was like, I guess I'll make a show. And like it's bizarre. And he pulled a bunch of other people that he knew who had like done reporting or who had done this sort of like critical literature on the Baltimore area. And he was like, cool, well, we need your expertise to sort of flesh this out and make it good. And very few of the people who were writing this show were actually screenwriters, which is why it has that kind of like documentary type feel to it almost.
Yeah, there's like an
everything's very
authenticity.
natural. All of the sound is diegetic sound. It's all like coming from a source on the screen. It's not something that is like layered over it, because they're not screenwriters. That's not what they were there to do. So it's a weird cast or a weird group of writers who came together to make the show happen, for sure.
All right, so do you want to give us a scale for rating this?
I don't know that I don't know that I have. I should have thought about a scale.
Where does this rate in like your top 5 of shows? Like, is it number 1? Is it in the top 5?
So that's a great question, and it's a hard one to answer. But I think that the answer, I don't know. It depends on what I want, right? Like, if I am looking to sit down and like have an experience where I'm watching something that has a lot to digest and has a lot going on, it's probably my top. I think I like it a little bit more than Breaking Bad, despite the fact that I love Breaking Bad, because I feel a little bit less like the people in this show are fuck ups. Like when you watch Breaking Bad, it's really easy to be like, okay, well, why didn't you just tell the truth? Like,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so fuck it. Like, you could have just fucking told I don't feel like that happens as much here. I feel like it does a really.
I can see how you can. Yeah, I understand that feeling.
Yeah, it sets up a lot like, here are the outside influences working on a person that drove them to make this decision. Here's the regrettable decision that they made. Here are the outcomes of that regrettable decision. Here's how everything snowballs completely out of control. And that feels a little bit, it's subtle. And that subtlety really helps. And so it's a little bit less sort of like painful, like heartachy to watch. Like we were talking about Luther. Luther gets kind of heartachy for me after a while, because at a certain point you're like, just fucking be honest. Like, it's gonna suck. You're not gonna get to do the thing you like, but
just rip that Band-Aid off.
Yeah, just rip off the Band-Aid. But it doesn't feel like that most of the time in this show. There are a few instances, but it's not like the main sort of source of plot progression, in the way that it can be a little bit more in other shows. So I would, if I'm looking for like a drama, if I'm looking for something chewy, I would put it very near the top, if not the top. If I'm just gonna turn something on TV, I'm like equally likely to turn on Drunk History, so I don't know. I'm not actually a refined individual. This is just the one thing I like that makes me seem kind of cool. So yeah, that's sort of where I would place it. I think.
Yeah. If I was to watch it, I would have to make myself watch it. I would understand that like the experience I'm having is like immersive and is, cool, but I don't know if like I just wanted to sit down and enjoy something. Like I think I'd need to have my head in the right place to watch the show. Like I would have to like make a commitment in my head. It's like, all right, I'm gonna watch this, I'm gonna watch it all, and I'm gonna experience it, and the good, the bad, everything, in order to like get through like a binge of it.
Yeah. I what I do like about it is that it goes down a very real, very gritty kind of path without being so shocking and really going for that shock factor. I feel like shows like Breaking Bad, they have to show you something really gritty and awful and make you watch it. Like put toothpicks in your eyeballs, like watch this really terrible
Hostile
thing.
Star.
Yeah, for sure.
And I can't watch that. Like, I turn things off, I walk away. Like, I can't engage that directly very often. And I certainly don't seek it out for entertainment value. But this kind of show where it's, obviously there were murders, they showed you dead bodies, but it never engaged with that in a very malicious and almost torturous kind of way.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate that. I think sometimes you have to approach that delicately, and you can still get your message across without shocking your audience.
Yeah. I think I have my scale. Here it is. It's binary, actually. And I think the answer might be different. Would you sit on the weird, crusty, orange drug dealer couch in the middle of the low rises to watch this show?
Oh my God. I don't want to be anywhere near that couch. And I feel like this is like, do you want $1 million, but you also get cancer? And it's like, the only reason I'd have to say no is because of that couch. Like, it's really that gross, and I don't want to be near it.
It's a pretty gross couch. I would definitely sit on the couch, but I also know the characters a little bit better, so I think I'd be okay. But I would for sure sit on that couch to watch this show.
Yeah, I think I'm with Aaron. You give me my couch, I guess I'll watch it, but I am definitely not watching it on that couch in that area. This seems like that would be a poor decision on my part.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I think that's us. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that next time our host is Keegan with the Campaign Podcast, the Star Wars episode. Is that right?
Yeah, that's what I have down. Here, just real quick. I'm looking at it. I'm having a little trouble with it. I wanted to ask you guys, have you watched Pushing Daisies?
No.
Yes. I think I've watched like an episode when it came out forever ago.
I might switch to that if I can find it on a service. Let me see real quick if I can find it on a
Let's take
service.
that offline and decide that after the show. But I just want to thank everybody for tuning in.
So much.
So we will be joined next time with Keegan as our host, and he will decide what we're going to watch next time.
With mystery media. A mystery media surprise.
Thank you guys so much.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.